The old upright piano in Melody's apartment had seen better days. Some keys stuck occasionally, and the finish was worn in places where countless fingers had pressed over decades. But to Melody Chen, it was the most valuable thing she owned, her one connection to a dream that life had forced her to put on hold. Lily. "We're going to be late, honey," Melody called out, checking her watch as she packed a worn music folder into her bag. "Remember, Ms. Patterson can only watch you until 9 tonight." Her 9-year-old daughter appeared from the bedroom of their small one-bedroom apartment, clutching a dog-eared library book. "Can I bring this?" "I'm almost at the good part." Melody smiled despite the exhaustion that seemed permanently etched into her face these days. "Of course. And maybe you can read a bit to Ms. Patterson. She loves hearing you." Ed. Their apartment was modest but clean, a testament to Melody's determination to provide stability, despite their circumstances. Photos lined the walls, Lily blowing out birthday candles, Melody in a graduation cap, the two of them making silly faces at a park. What the images didn't show were the struggles behind each smile. The late nights Melody spent working on freelance transcription jobs after Lily went to bed, the careful budgeting that determined whether they could afford fresh fruit that week, or the mounting medical bills from Lily's asthma treatments. Grabbing her keys, Melody did a mental check of their evening routine. Lily had eaten dinner, homework was done, and Miss Patterson from downstairs had agreed to watch her while Melody played her evening volunteer shift at Memorial Hospital. The elderly woman had become a godsend since Melody's ex-husband, Tom, had stopped showing up for his weekends with Lily over a year ago. Child support checks came irregularly, if at all. "Do you think any kids will listen to you play tonight?" Lily asked as they made their way down the stairs of their apartment building. "I hope so." "That's the whole reason I go," Melody replied. "Music helps people feel better when they're scared or sad." Lily nodded with the wisdom only children possess. "Like when you played for me during my asthma attack." Melody squeezed her daughter's hand. That night had been terrifying. Lily struggling for breath, the nebulizer not working fast enough. Melody had played Lily's favorite lullaby on her phone while they waited for the medication to work, helping her daughter focus on something besides her fear. Ms. Patterson greeted them with a warm smile, the scent of fresh cookies wafting from her apartment. "There's my favorite reading buddy. I hear you've got a new book." After settling Lily and thanking Ms. Patterson, Melody hurried to catch the 6:15 bus that would get her to the hospital by 6:45, 15 minutes before her volunteer shift began. The hospital was only 4 miles away, but with no car and winter approaching, the bus was her only option. Melody leaned her head against the window as the city passed by. 2 years ago, things had been different. She'd been teaching piano lessons at a community music school, while working toward her music therapy certification. Tom had still been around, and they'd lived in a comfortable 2-bedroom with a yard where Lily could play. Then came Tom's gambling problem, the divorce, and the school's budget cuts that eliminated her position. Now she worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons as a receptionist at a dental office, and spent her evenings either picking up freelance work or volunteering at the hospital, anything to keep her music dream alive while keeping a roof over their heads. The hospital loomed ahead as the bus approached her stop. Memorial Hospital was the largest in the city, a sprawling complex that served patients from across the state. Despite its institutional appearance, Melody had found an unexpected sanctuary within its walls. "Evening, Melody," called Ray, the security guard, as she signed in at the volunteer desk. His familiar face was one of many that had become part of her routine over the past 8 months. "How's it going tonight?" she asked, pinning her volunteer badge to her simple blue sweater. "Busy in the ER, quiet upstairs. The usual Tuesday." He lowered his voice. "Mrs. Himura is back in oncology. Room 412. She was asking if you'd be here tonight." Melody nodded, making a mental note to visit the elderly woman who loved classical pieces. "I'll stop by." "Thanks, Ray." The baby grand piano sat in the corner of the main lobby, a donation from a grateful patient's family years ago. When Melody had first approached the volunteer coordinator about playing, she'd expected to be turned away. Instead, Clara had practically hugged her. "Do you know how long we've been trying to find someone to play that thing regularly?" she'd exclaimed. "Music changes the whole atmosphere of this place." Now, as Melody settled onto the bench and arranged her sheet music, she felt the familiar sense of purpose that came only when her fingers touched the keys. "Here, She wasn't a struggling single mom counting pennies or worrying about next month's rent. She was just a musician, offering what little comfort she could. She began with something gentle, Debussy's Clair de Lune, letting the notes float through the busy lobby. A mother with a sleeping toddler on her shoulder paused near the piano, her tense shoulders visibly relaxing as she swayed slightly to the music. Melody moved through her usual repertoire, a mix of classical pieces, simplified movie themes that children recognized, and the occasional jazz standard. She didn't play for applause or recognition. She played for the elderly man who stopped his nervous pacing to listen, for the worried-looking couple who sat nearby holding hands, for the nurses who paused momentarily on their way to their shifts. An hour into her playing, Melody noticed a little boy in Spider-Man pajamas watching her from behind a column. His arm was in a cast and he had the pale look of someone who'd been in the hospital too long. She transitioned into the theme from The Avengers, and the boy's eyes widened in recognition. He inched closer until he was standing beside the piano, watching her fingers move across the keys with fascination. "Do you like music?" Melody asked softly between pieces. The boy nodded. "I used to take lessons before I got sick. Would you like to try?" She scooted over on the bench, making room. After a hesitant glance toward his mother, who gave an encouraging nod from a nearby chair, the boy climbed up beside her. Together they played a simple duet, the boy using his good hand to play a repeated pattern while Melody built a song around it. His giggles when they finished were exactly why she came here, night after night. Despite her exhaustion, as her scheduled time ended, Clara approached with a cup of tea. "You're a gift to this place, you know that?" she said, handing Melody the steaming cup. "Dr. Garcia said the atmosphere in the pediatric waiting room has completely changed on the nights you're here." Melody accepted the tea gratefully. "I should be thanking you. This piano saved me when I lost my teaching job. Playing here, it keeps my dreams alive." Clara sat beside her on a nearby chair. "Any luck with the music therapy program at Westside?" Melody shook her head. "The interview went well, but they're looking for someone with a completed certification. Mine's still on hold until I can afford to finish the last 2 courses." "Well, don't give up." Clara patted her hand. "The right door will open eventually." After finishing her tea, Melody made her way to the elevator for her promised visit to Mrs. Himura. As she passed the gift shop, her eye caught on a small stuffed penguin, Lily's favorite animal. It was $12.99, nearly 2 hours of work at the coffee shop after taxes. Her budget was already stretched thin with the electric bill due next week. Melody hesitated, then continued walking. Lily's birthday was coming up in a month. Maybe by then she could set aside enough for both the penguin and the science kit Lily had been eyeing. For now they had what mattered, each other a roof over their heads and music that sustained them both. In room 412, Mrs. Himura brightened when Melody appeared. The elderly woman was fighting pancreatic cancer with a grace that humbled everyone around her. "I brought my music folder," Melody said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Any requests tonight?" "Anything peaceful," Mrs. Himura replied. "It's been a difficult day with tests," Melody hummed softly, creating a gentle melody that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth. Mrs. Himura closed her eyes, her breathing becoming deeper and more relaxed. This was music's true power, Melody thought. Not the accolades or applause she once dreamed of, but these small moments of connection and comfort. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, the juggling of bills, the long hours, the struggle to keep her own dreams alive while nurturing Lily's, tonight, at least she was exactly where she needed to be. Later, as she rode the bus back home, Melody pulled out her phone to check her bank balance, $247.16 until payday on Friday. Enough for groceries and bus fare, but not enough for the registration deadline for spring classes at the community college. Another semester without progress toward her certification. She sighed, putting the phone away and looking out at the city lights. Sometimes it felt like she was running in place, never getting ahead. But then she thought of the boy's face as they played together, of Mrs. Himura finding moments of peace amid her pain, of Lily's proud smile when Melody attended her school performance despite working a double shift. Perhaps she wasn't living the life she'd once imagined, but there was purpose in what she did, both for others and for her daughter. And maybe, just maybe, if she kept showing up, kept playing, kept believing, someone would eventually hear the music she had to offer. The bus stopped 3 blocks from their apartment building. Melody walked briskly through the chilly night, eager to see Lily before bedtime. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, the melody still echoed in her mind, carrying her forward one step at a time. A week later, Memorial Hospital buzzed with unusual activity. Melody noticed it immediately as she hurried through the sliding glass doors, still catching her breath from running to catch the bus after her shift at the dental office ran late. "What's going on?" she asked Ray, who was directing people away from the East Wing. "Water pipe burst on the 3rd floor," he explained, adjusting his security uniform. "Nothing serious, but they've closed off a few rooms until maintenance can fix it." Everyone's a bit on edge. The lobby was more crowded than usual, filled with redirected visitors and patients waiting for appointments. Hospital staff rushed about, their faces tight with the controlled tension that comes with unexpected complications. Melody made her way to the piano, weaving through clusters of people. Tonight would be different, she realized. Instead of the usual atmosphere where her music served as pleasant background, tonight people needed comfort. The anxiety in the air was palpable. She settled at the bench, placing her worn music folder beside her. Rather than starting with her usual classical pieces, she began with "What a Wonderful World," letting the familiar melody wash over the chaotic space. A few heads turned, some shoulders relaxed, and a hint of the tension in the room began to dissipate. For the next hour, Melody played continuously, choosing songs that felt like a warm blanket on a cold day, pieces that reminded people of simpler times and happier moments. She noticed a group of nurses pause briefly at the edge of the lobby, their tired faces softening before they continued their rounds. During a brief pause between songs, Melody scanned the room. Her gaze stopped at a corner near the gift shop, where a teenage girl sat alone on a bench, her knees pulled up to her chest. The girl looked about 14 or 15, with long dark hair partially hiding her face. Even from a distance, Melody could see she was trembling. Something about the girl's posture stirred Melody's instincts. It reminded her of how Lily looked during anxiety attacks, that same desperate attempt to make herself smaller, to disappear from whatever was causing her distress. Melody began to play again, this time choosing Debussy's Arabesque, letting her fingers find the delicate, flowing notes that always seemed to calm Lily. She didn't stare at the girl directly but kept her in peripheral vision, noticing how the girl's head lifted slightly at the change in music. The hospital intercom crackled to life, announcing a code in the ICU. Several staff members rushed toward the elevators, creating another wave of tension. The girl in the corner flinched at the sudden noise, pressing herself further against the wall. Her breathing seemed to quicken. Melody recognized the beginning signs of a panic attack. No hospital staff were nearby to help. Everyone was occupied with the pipe emergency or the code. Making a quick decision, Melody transitioned into a piece she had composed herself during her darkest days after the divorce. A gentle, repetitive melody that helped her find her own breath when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. She played louder, not enough to be disruptive, but enough that it might reach through whatever storm was happening inside the girl's mind. Between phrases, Melody took deliberate, visible breaths, hoping the girl might unconsciously follow the pattern. For several minutes, nothing changed. Then, almost imperceptibly, the girl's shoulders lowered slightly. Her death grip on her knees loosened. Melody continued, adding variations to the melody but maintaining the steady rhythm that mimicked calm breathing. "Excuse me," a deep voice interrupted. Melody looked up to find a tall man in an expensive-looking coat standing beside the piano. Something about his presence commanded attention, perhaps the perfect tailoring of his clothes or the way he stood with quiet confidence. He seemed out of place in the usually democratic setting of the hospital, where illness and injury erased distinctions of wealth and status. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice lower now. "But are you a staff member?" Melody shook her head, her fingers still moving across the keys. "I volunteer here 3 nights a week." The man glanced toward the corner where the girl sat. "That's my daughter over there, Zoe." He hesitated, unusual uncertainty crossing his face. "She's having some trouble. I was going to find a nurse, but then I noticed—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Melody understood. He had noticed the subtle connection between the music and his daughter's gradually calming state. "Does she have anxiety?" Melody asked softly, modulating the piece into something a bit more uplifting as she spoke. The man nodded. Since her mother died 2 years ago. It comes and goes, but being in hospitals is particularly difficult. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked dark hair. We're here for some tests, nothing serious, just routine follow-ups, but there was some kind of emergency announcement, and then she just... I understand, Melody said. My daughter has anxiety too. Music helps sometimes. She transitioned into another piece, one with a slightly more hopeful tone. The man watched her hands for a moment, then looked back at his daughter. It seems to be working, he observed. Her therapist has suggested music before, but Zoe hasn't shown interest in any instruments. Sometimes it's not about playing, Melody explained, keeping her voice gentle as she continued the music. It's about having something outside yourself to focus on. The rhythm gives her mind something to follow instead of the anxious thoughts. The man studied Melody with new interest. You sound like you know a lot about this. I was studying music therapy before. She trailed off, not wanting to share her financial struggles with this stranger. I still hope to finish my certification someday. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention as paramedics rushed in with a new emergency. The noise level in the lobby rose sharply. In the corner, Zoe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with renewed panic. Keep playing, the man said urgently. Please, I'll go to her. Melody nodded, immediately shifting to a louder, more structured piece that might help drown out the chaotic sounds. She watched as the man approached his daughter carefully, sitting beside her without touching her. His lips moved in what appeared to be gentle reassurances as he pointed toward the piano. Gradually, Zoe's focus shifted from the emergency activity to the music. The man said something else, and to Melody's surprise, Zoe nodded. Together they rose and made their way across the lobby to the piano. Zoe, this is, the man began, then paused, realizing he hadn't asked Melody's name. Melody, she supplied with a warm smile, still playing with one hand while she offered the other to Zoe. It's nice to meet you. Zoe didn't take her hand, but she did offer a tiny nod of acknowledgement. Up close, Melody could see the girl's tear-streaked face and the red marks where her nails had dug into her palms. Would you like to sit with me? Melody asked, scooting over on the bench. After a hesitant glance at her father, who gave an encouraging nod, Zoe perched on the edge of the bench. Melody continued playing, now adding a simple pattern in the higher register. Can you help me with this part? She asked, nodding toward the higher notes. Just press this key, then this one, then this one. Whenever I nod. It was a technique Melody had used with children at the community music school, giving them a simple, manageable task that made them part of the music without overwhelming them. Zoe placed a trembling finger on the first key Melody had indicated. When Melody nodded, she pressed it, the clear note rising above the melody. Melody smiled encouragingly, and when she nodded again, Zoe pressed the second key. Slowly, a pattern emerged, Melody creating a foundation while Zoe added simple but essential notes that completed the harmony. The man watched them, something like wonder crossing his face. Hospital staff moved around them, the controlled chaos of the emergency continuing, but at the piano a small bubble of calm had formed. You're doing great, Melody told Zoe after several minutes. Music is like breathing, isn't it? In and out, up and down. Zoe didn't speak, but her breathing had slowed to match the rhythm of the music. Her shoulders had completely relaxed, and she was now fully seated on the bench rather than perched on its edge. Clara, the volunteer coordinator, approached them with a look of approval. The head nurse asked me to thank you, she told Melody quietly. Your music is helping keep everyone calmer during this craziness. She smiled at Zoe. And I see you found a new friend. After Clara left, the man cleared his throat. I should introduce myself properly. I'm Richard Taylor. Something about the name tickled Melody's memory, but she couldn't place it. Nice to meet you, Mr. Taylor. Please call me Richard. He glanced at his watch, a sleek, expensive timepiece that probably cost more than Melody's rent for 6 months. Zoe's appointment was rescheduled because of the pipe issue. We should probably head out soon. Disappointment flickered across Zoe's face. Seeing it, Melody made a quick decision. Zoe, would you like to try one more song before you go? She pulled out a simple sheet with colored notes, something she used with younger children. Each color tells you which key to press. No experience needed. For the first time, a hint of interest sparked in Zoe's eyes. She nodded. For the next 10 minutes, Melody guided Zoe through a simple version of Over the Rainbow, patiently showing her which keys to press and when. By the end, Zoe had actually played a recognizable melody. "That was wonderful," Richard said, genuine warmth in his voice. "I had no idea you had such a talent for music, Zoe." The girl didn't smile, but some of the tension had left her face. She looked at Melody and whispered, "Thank you." Those two small words, the first Zoe had spoken since their introduction, felt like a victory. Melody smiled back. "You're very welcome. Music is always here when you need it." As Richard and Zoe prepared to leave, he turned to Melody with an intensity that caught her off guard. "You did more for my daughter in 20 minutes than her therapist has accomplished in months." "Are you here every week?" "Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays," Melody replied. "From 7 to 9. "We'll be back on Friday for the rescheduled appointment," he said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, "Thank you. Truly." Melody watched them leave, the tall, commanding man and his fragile daughter. There had been something familiar about Richard Taylor, but she couldn't place it. Perhaps he was a doctor at another hospital or a professor at the university. With a small shrug, she turned back to the piano. People came and went in this lobby. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of stories. Her job wasn't to know their backgrounds, but to offer whatever comfort her music could provide during their most difficult moments. As she began to play again, she found herself hoping that Zoe would indeed return on Friday. There was something about the girl that reminded Melody of herself at that age, lost, struggling, in need of something to hold on to. If music could be that lifeline even for a few minutes each week, it would be worth every late night and missed bus. Friday evening arrived with a persistent drizzle that turned the city streets slick and gray. Melody hurried toward the hospital entrance, her thin jacket offering little protection against the chilling October rain. Her day had been particularly exhausting. The morning shift at the coffee shop had been understaffed, and she'd spent her lunch break on the phone with Lily's school counselor, discussing her daughter's recent difficulty concentrating in class. "Probably just tired," Melody had explained, guilt weighing on her words. "She's been staying up helping me fold laundry some nights." She hadn't mentioned that Lily insisted on helping because she'd overheard Melody crying over bills last month. At 9 years old, her daughter already carried an awareness of their precarious situation that no child should have to bear. As Melody signed in at the volunteer desk, she wondered if Richard and Zoe Taylor would return as promised. Part of her hoped they would. The connection she'd felt with Zoe had been unexpected but genuine. Another part worried about disappointment if they didn't show up. People like Richard Taylor, whoever he was, lived in a different world from hers. Promises made in moments of gratitude often faded when the moment passed. "You're popular tonight," Ray commented, handing her the volunteer badge. "Got a request already?" "A request?" Melody asked, puzzled. Ray nodded toward the piano. "Some guy called the volunteer office this morning asking if you'd be here. Left a note, too." He handed her a cream-colored envelope with Melody, written in elegant handwriting on the front. Inside was a note on heavy stationery. "Melody, Zoe has been talking about the music you played together. We'll be at her appointment until 7:30. If you're playing tonight, we'd like to stop by afterward." Richard Taylor. Melody tucked the note into her pocket, surprised by the small flutter of anticipation it triggered. It wasn't just the prospect of seeing Zoe again, though that was part of it. There was something intriguing about Richard Taylor, a depth behind his polished exterior that had caught her attention. The hospital was quieter tonight, the water pipe emergency resolved. Melody began with her usual repertoire, glancing occasionally at the entrance. At precisely 7:35, Richard and Zoe appeared, their contrasting figures immediately recognizable. Him tall and commanding, her slight and hesitant. Melody transitioned smoothly into Over the Rainbow, the piece she had taught Zoe during their last encounter. She smiled warmly as they approached, noting the flicker of recognition in Zoe's eyes when she heard the familiar melody. "We made it," Richard said by way of greeting, helping Zoe out of her expensive-looking coat. "Her appointment ran a bit long." "I'm glad you came," Melody replied sincerely, continuing to play with one hand. "How are you tonight, Zoe?" The girl gave a non-committal shrug, but Melody noticed she seemed less tense than before. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, revealing delicate features that resembled her father's. "Would you like to join me again?" Melody asked, scooting over on the bench. After a brief hesitation and a glance at her father, Zoe sat down. This time, instead of waiting to be instructed, she tentatively placed her fingers on the keys where Melody had shown her last time. "You remember?" Melody said with genuine surprise. "That's wonderful." For the next half hour they played together, Melody gradually introducing new notes and patterns, Zoe following with increasing confidence. Richard sat in a nearby chair, his attention fixed on his daughter with an intensity that spoke of both love and worry. "You have a natural feel for rhythm," Melody told Zoe as they finished another simple duet. "Have you ever taken music lessons?" Zoe shook her head. "Mom wanted me to," she said quietly, the most words Melody had heard from her so far. "But I didn't want to then." Richard leaned forward. "Your mother played the cello," he explained to Melody. "Professionally before Zoe was born." "She was really good," Zoe added, a hint of pride breaking through her reserve. "Dad has videos." The mention of Zoe's mother hung in the air between them, a shared understanding of loss that needed no elaboration. Melody thought of her own mother who had passed away when she was in college, and how music had been her salvation during those dark days. "Music stays with us," Melody said gently, "even when the people we love can't." Zoe's fingers hovered over the keys, not playing but not pulling away either. "Can you teach me something else?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Of course." Melody selected a simple version of Beethoven's Für Elise from her folder. "This one's a bit trickier, but we can take it slowly." As they worked through the piece, a small audience gathered, a family waiting for news about a surgery, an elderly couple taking a break from visiting a relative, two nurses on their dinner break. The simple melody, imperfectly but earnestly played by Zoe with Melody's guidance, seemed to touch something in everyone who listened. When they finished, there was a smattering of applause. Color rose in Zoe's cheeks. Not the flush of anxiety this time, but something closer to pleasure. "That was lovely," said an older woman who had been watching. "It reminds me of when my granddaughter was learning." Zoe ducked her head, uncomfortable with the attention but not panicking. Richard watched his daughter with an expression Melody couldn't quite interpret, something between astonishment and hope. As the impromptu audience dispersed, Richard checked his watch. "We should probably head out soon. It's getting late." Disappointment flashed across Zoe's face, but we just started the new song. It was the first time Melody had heard anything like normal teenage protest in Zoe's voice. "Progress," she thought. "Maybe we could come again," Richard suggested, looking to Melody. "If that wouldn't be imposing?" "Not at all," Melody replied. "I'm here Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Zoe is welcome any time." "Tuesdays and Fridays work with our schedule," Richard said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Perhaps we could make it a regular thing. I'd be happy to make a donation to the hospital's music program." Melody smiled. "There isn't actually a music program. Just me and this piano." Richard looked genuinely surprised. "No program?" "But the therapeutic benefits are clear." He gestured toward Zoe, who was still running her fingers lightly over the keys, lost in her own world. "I've been taking her to expensive specialists for 2 years and none of them connected with her the way you have. Music therapy is still gaining recognition," Melody explained, "especially in hospital settings. Funding is always an issue." Richard nodded thoughtfully, and Melody had the distinct impression that wheels were turning behind his composed exterior. As they prepared to leave, Zoe surprised both adults by asking, "Could I have a copy of the music? To look at before next time?" "Of course." Melody quickly made a photocopy of the simplified Für Elise at the volunteer desk. "Practice the first 8 measures if you can. No pressure, though." Zoe carefully placed the sheet music in her bag. "Thank you," she said, meeting Melody's eyes briefly. "You're very welcome," Melody replied, touched by the small gesture of trust. After they left, Clara approached the piano with 2 cups of tea. "Those 2 have been here waiting for you since before your shift started," she said, handing Melody a cup. "The man was asking about you." "Asking what?" Melody's curiosity was piqued. Clara shrugged. "How long you've been volunteering, your background." "I told him you were studying music therapy before. You know." "Before life happened," Melody finished with a small smile. "I hope that was okay." "Of course. I didn't share anything personal." Clara sipped her tea. "He seemed impressed by you. Said something about his daughter not connecting with people easily since her mother died." Melody thought about Zoe's tentative smile as she played the final notes of their duet. Music can reach places words can't sometimes. Later that night, after checking on a sleeping Lily and settling at her kitchen table with bills spread before her, Melody found herself thinking about the Taylors again. There was something familiar about Richard that she couldn't place. His name tickled at her memory, but the connection remained elusive. On impulse, she opened her laptop and typed Richard Taylor into a search engine. What appeared made her nearly spill her tea. Richard Taylor, founder and CEO of Taylor Innovations, a tech company valued at billions. His face stared back at her from the screen, the same face that had watched his daughter play piano in a hospital lobby. Though in the professional photo, he looked more polished, less human. Articles detailed his rise from startup founder to tech mogul, his philanthropic efforts after his wife Elena's death from cancer, his reputation as a brilliant but private person. One recent piece mentioned that Taylor Innovations was opening a new headquarters in their city, bringing hundreds of jobs and millions in tax revenue. Melody closed the laptop, unsettled. The man who had sat in a hospital lobby watching his daughter play simple duets was one of the wealthiest people in the country. It explained the expensive clothes, the commanding presence, the offer to donate to a non-existent music program. What it didn't explain was why someone like Richard Taylor would want his daughter to learn piano from someone like her, a struggling single mother playing volunteer shifts at a hospital because she couldn't afford to finish her certification unless it wasn't about the music at all, but about the connection, about finding someone who could reach Zoe in her grief. Melody turned back to her bills, the familiar anxiety returning as she calculated how short they'd be this month. The dental office had cut her hours again, and Lily needed new winter boots. Even with her 3 jobs, they were barely treading water. She thought of Zoe's face lighting up as they played together, and Richard's expression as he watched them. Whatever their differences in circumstance, they shared something universal: the love of a parent for a child, the desire to ease pain, the healing power of music. Tuesday suddenly seemed very far away. For the first time in months, Melody found herself looking forward to something beyond just making it through another day. She wondered if Zoe would practice the music she'd given her. She wondered if Richard would ask more questions about music therapy. She wondered what it would be like to have resources to match her passion, to finish her certification, to develop a real program that could help people like Zoe, to use music not just as a volunteer but as her life's work. With a sigh, she returned to her calculations. Dreams were wonderful, but reality demanded attention. For tonight, at least, she allowed herself to hold on to the memory of those simple duets and the progress they represented, not just for Zoe, but perhaps for herself as well. Over the next 3 weeks, Tuesdays and Fridays became something Melody looked forward to with growing anticipation. Each session with Zoe showed subtle but meaningful progress. The girl who had once huddled in a corner, overwhelmed by anxiety, now walked directly to the piano when she arrived, her step still cautious but purposeful. She practiced all weekend. Richard confided one Tuesday evening as they watched Zoe carefully work through the piece they'd been learning. "I found her at the piano in the music room, a room nobody's used since Elena died. She had your sheet music propped up and was playing the same measures over and over." Melody smiled, watching Zoe's concentration as her fingers found the right keys. "Repetition is how we learn. It builds muscle memory and confidence." "It's more than that," Richard said, his voice low enough that Zoe couldn't hear. "This is the first thing she's shown interest in since—" He trailed off, but Melody understood. "Since losing her mother. Her therapist says it's a breakthrough." Knowing who Richard was hadn't changed how Melody interacted with him or Zoe, but it had added an undercurrent of awareness to their conversations. This man could buy and sell the hospital if he wanted to. He could hire the world's best music teachers for his daughter. Yet here he was, watching Zoe learn simple duets with a volunteer pianist. "She's ready for something more challenging," Melody told him, observing how Zoe had mastered the current piece. "She has natural talent." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be willing to give her private lessons? Outside the hospital, I mean." "I'd pay you, of course." The offer caught Melody off guard. Private lessons would mean extra income. Income they desperately needed with winter approaching and the heating bill about to triple. But it would also mean less time with Lily, who already saw too little of her mother. I'd need to check my schedule, she said carefully. Between my jobs and Lily's school activities, of course, Richard said quickly. Take your time to consider it. We could work around your availability. Before she could respond, Zoe called out, Melody. I figured out the tricky part. Both adults turned their attention back to the piano, where Zoe had indeed mastered a difficult transition between chords that had been challenging her. That's wonderful, Melody praised, sitting beside her on the bench. Your hands are getting stronger. See how your fingers stretch farther now? Zoe nodded, a hint of pride in her usually solemn face. Can you show me what comes next? The rest of the evening passed quickly, with Zoe absorbing new material like a sponge. By the end of the session, she could play a simplified version of Mozart's Rondo alla Turca, her fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. As they prepared to leave, Richard handed Melody an envelope. Just some information about private lessons, he explained. Take your time looking it over. At home later that night, after tucking Lily in with promises of making pancakes together on Sunday morning, Melody opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter offering not just compensation for private piano lessons for Zoe, but a consultant position helping to develop a music therapy program at Memorial Hospital, with a salary that made her breath catch. The amount was more than she currently earned from all three of her jobs combined. Attached was a note in Richard's handwriting. Melody, I've been researching music therapy programs. Memorial Hospital has agreed to pilot one if we can find the right person to develop it. Your knowledge and natural ability make you the obvious choice. This could help many more people like Zoe. Please consider it. Richard. Melody sat at her kitchen table staring at the paper until the numbers blurred. The opportunity was everything she'd dreamed of. A chance to finish her certification, to build a program from the ground up, to help people through music without worrying about bus fare or grocery money. It was also terrifying. What if she failed? What if she couldn't balance a new career with being a mother? What if Richard's interest in helping her was only because of Zoe? And once his daughter improved, the funding disappeared. Sleep eluded her that night as possibilities and doubts battled in her mind. The next morning, she called Ms. Patterson to watch Lily for an hour and walked to a coffee shop several blocks from their apartment. She needed neutral space to think, away from the bills on her kitchen table and the leaky faucet she couldn't afford to fix. Just a plain coffee, she told the barista, carefully counting out the exact change. As she waited for her order, a local news broadcast played on the coffee shop's television, Tech Billionaire. Richard Taylor made headlines today with the announcement of a new community initiative tied to his company's headquarters in our city, the reporter said. Taylor Innovations will partner with Memorial Hospital to create one of the country's most comprehensive music therapy programs, serving patients of all ages. Melody's coffee nearly slipped from her hand as Richard's face appeared on screen. He stood at a podium, looking every bit the powerful CEO in a perfectly tailored suit. Music has the power to heal in ways traditional medicine sometimes cannot, he was saying. We've seen this firsthand and believe this program will transform patient care while creating meaningful employment opportunities in our community. The camera panned to hospital administrators nodding in agreement, Clara among them. The news anchor returned, adding, the program will include education components and scholarships for those pursuing music therapy certification. Construction of a dedicated space at Memorial Hospital begins next month. Melody sat down, her mind racing. Richard hadn't mentioned any of this during their last session. The program he'd outlined in his letter was far smaller than what was being announced publicly. Did he still want her involvement? Or had he found more qualified people already? Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Hope you saw the news. Would like to discuss your role in more detail. Can you meet today? Richard Taylor. Attached was an address in the downtown business district, where Taylor Innovations' new headquarters was under construction. After arranging for Ms. Patterson to pick Lily up from school, Melody found herself standing before a gleaming high-rise later that afternoon. The contrast between this building and her apartment complex couldn't have been more stark, one reaching confidently toward the sky, the other sagging under the weight of deferred maintenance and tight budgets. The receptionist led her to an elevator that whisked her to the top floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. Richard was waiting in a conference room, dressed more casually than he appeared on television. but still exuding an authority that made the spacious room feel smaller. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "I apologize for the short notice." "I saw the announcement," Melody said, deciding directness was best. "It's much bigger than what you outlined in your letter." Richard nodded. The hospital board was more enthusiastic than expected. Once they saw the potential benefits and funding opportunities, they wanted to expand the scope. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a formal job offer: Director of Music Therapy Services at Memorial Hospital, with a salary that made the previous offer look modest, plus full benefits and a scholarship to complete her certification. "This isn't charity," Richard said, seeming to read her thoughts. "The hospital needs someone with both clinical knowledge and practical experience. Someone who understands the healing power of music from the inside out." He paused. Someone who could connect with a traumatized teenager when nobody else could. Melody stared at the document, her heart racing. "Why me? There must be fully certified therapists you could hire." "Because you have something that can't be taught," Richard replied, his typical businesslike demeanor softening. "When Zoe first sat with you at that piano, I saw my daughter return to me in a way that hadn't happened in 2 years. No amount of credentials can replace that kind of intuitive understanding." He stood and walked to the window. "After Elena died, Zoe shut down. The best doctors, the most expensive treatments, nothing helped. Then a water pipe burst and we ended up in a hospital lobby where a volunteer pianist somehow knew exactly what my daughter needed." He turned back to face her. "That's not coincidence. That's gift." Melody thought of her own journey, the dreams deferred after her divorce, the struggle to provide for Lily while holding on to her passion, the volunteer shifts that seemed so small, but had apparently created ripples she never imagined. "What about Zoe's lessons?" she asked. "Would those continue?" "If you're willing," Richard said, "though they might need to be worked around your new schedule. The program will take time to build, but the hospital wants to launch the first components within 6 weeks. 6 weeks, barely enough time to give notice at her current jobs, to reorganize their lives, to prepare Lily for the changes ahead." "I'd need flexibility," Melody said, surprising herself with her assertiveness. "My daughter comes first, and I'd want to be involved in the scholarship program development, to make sure it helps people who really need it." Richard's expression shifted to something that looked like respect. "I wouldn't have expected anything less. The contract includes flexible hours and remote work options when needed. And I'd welcome your input on the scholarship criteria." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Zoe asks about you and Lily sometimes. She's never been interested in my work before, but she wanted to know if the program would help other kids like her." The mention of Zoe's concern for others, a sign of healing in itself, touched Melody deeply. "Need to think about it," she said honestly. "This would change everything for us." "Of course," Richard agreed, "but sometimes change is what we need most." He extended his hand. "Whatever you decide, thank you for what you've already done for my daughter. Some things can't be repaid." As Melody left the building, clutching the folder with the job offer, she felt as though she were standing on the edge of a diving board, terrified of the leap, yet knowing that remaining in place was no longer an option. That night, as she and Lily ate dinner at their small kitchen table, she found herself studying her daughter's face. "How would you feel if I changed jobs?" she asked carefully. "I'd be working at the hospital where I play piano, but in a different way. We'd have more money, but things would be different." Lily considered the question with the seriousness only children can bring to adult discussions. "Would you be happier? You look tired a lot." The simple observation, delivered without judgment, brought unexpected tears to Melody's eyes. "I think I might be," she admitted. "And we wouldn't have to worry so much about bills." "Then you should do it," Lily said with the clarity of childhood. "You always tell me to follow my heart." Melody reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "When did you get so wise?" Later, after Lily had fallen asleep, Melody sat at their old piano, her fingers moving softly over the keys. The melody that emerged was new, something hopeful and a little tentative, like the first green shoots after a long winter. 6 months later, Melody stood in the doorway of the newly completed music therapy center at Memorial Hospital, hardly able to believe the transformation. The space that had once been unused storage rooms now housed 3 practice rooms with various instruments, a recording studio, a group therapy area, And her own office, a real office with her name on the door and windows that let in natural light. "What do you think?" Richard asked, coming to stand beside her. "Does it meet your specifications?" Melody ran her hand over the polished wood of the baby grand piano that anchored the main room, a significant upgrade from the well-used upright that had previously occupied the lobby. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I still can't believe this is happening." The past months had been a whirlwind of change. After accepting Richard's offer, Melody had given notice at her 3 jobs, enrolled in an accelerated program to complete her music therapy certification, and moved with Lily into a sunny 2-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital. The scholarship program Richard had established covered her education expenses, and the salary allowed them financial breathing room for the first time in years. "The board wants to schedule the official opening for next month," Richard said, checking his watch. "They're thinking a small ceremony, some press coverage. Nothing too disruptive to the patients." Melody nodded absently, her mind already racing with plans. She had hired 2 part-time assistants, both music therapy students who needed practical experience, and developed protocols for different patient populations. The oncology department was particularly eager to incorporate music therapy into their treatment plans. "Have you told Zoe about the teen group starting next week?" she asked. A smile softened Richard's usually businesslike expression. "I mentioned it. She pretended not to be interested, but I found her looking at your brochure later." Zoe's progress over the past months had been remarkable. The girl still had difficult days, still struggled with anxiety in new situations, but the piano had become her anchor. She practiced daily now and had recently asked to join a youth music program outside the hospital, a huge step for someone who had once barely spoken to strangers. "She'll come when she's ready," Melody said confidently. "No pressure." Richard checked his watch again. "I should get back to the office. Construction meeting for the new research wing." He hesitated, then added, "Zoe asked if Lily could come over this weekend. Apparently there's a movie they both want to see." The developing friendship between the girls had been an unexpected bonus. Despite their different backgrounds, Lily and Zoe had connected over their shared love of science fiction and puzzles. Lily's straightforward nature seemed to put Zoe at ease, while Zoe's quiet thoughtfulness balanced Lily's energetic personality. "Lily would love that," Melody replied. "She's been talking about that movie all week." After Richard left, Melody spent the afternoon arranging instruments and finalizing the schedule for the first week of official programming. The center would serve both inpatients and outpatients, with special focus on pediatrics, geriatrics, and mental health. She had even developed a program for new parents with babies in the NICU, something she wished had existed when Lily was born prematurely. As she worked, she thought about how much her life had changed since that evening, when she had first noticed a frightened teenage girl in the hospital lobby. The memory still felt vivid, the crowded space, the tension in the air, the instinctive decision to use music as a bridge. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Clara stood there, beaming with pride. "It's really happening," the volunteer coordinator said, looking around the new space. "I knew you were special the first time you played in our lobby, but I never imagined this." Melody hugged her friend. "I wouldn't be here without you giving me that chance." "Nonsense. You made this happen with your talent and heart." Clara handed her a gift bag, just a little something to celebrate. Inside was a framed photograph of Melody at the old lobby piano, her head bent in concentration as her fingers touched the keys. The image captured a moment from before Richard and Zoe, before the job offer, before everything changed. "To remember where it started," Clara explained. "Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest ripples." Later that evening, as Melody prepared dinner in their new apartment, Lily burst through the door, waving a paper excitedly. "Mom, I got an A on my science project. Ms. Hernandez said my presentation was the best in class." Melody wiped her hands and embraced her daughter. "That's wonderful." All that research really paid off. The project, a study on how music affects plant growth, had been inspired by Melody's work. Lily had spent weeks carefully tending to 2 sets of seedlings, playing different types of music for one group, while the other grew in silence. Her conclusion that classical music produced the tallest plants had led to a new hobby, playing piano for her growing collection of houseplants. "Can we call Dad and tell him?" Lily asked, already reaching for Melody's phone. The improved relationship with Tom, Lily's father, was another unexpected development. Once Melody's financial situation stabilized, the tension between them had eased. Tom had even started making regular child support payments and taking Lily for scheduled weekends. "Of course," Melody said. "And maybe after dinner we can work on that new duet? The one you want to play at Grandma's birthday?" Lily's face lit up. She had started piano lessons 3 months ago and practiced with a dedication that surprised everyone except Melody, who recognized the same natural affinity for music that she herself had discovered as a child. After dinner and piano practice, with Lily finally asleep, Melody sat at her own piano, a housewarming gift from the hospital board. Her fingers moved across the keys, finding the melody she had been working on in stolen moments between her many responsibilities. The piece had begun as a simple expression of gratitude, but had evolved into something more complex. She called it Unexpected Harmony, and it incorporated elements of the first song she had played with Zoe, themes that represented Lily's energy and curiosity, and a recurring motif that somehow captured Richard's steady presence in their lives. The next day, Friday afternoon, found Melody leading her first official session in the new center. 6 cancer patients sat in a semicircle, some holding instruments, others simply listening as she guided them through a series of music-based relaxation exercises designed to reduce pain perception and anxiety. "Music gives us something outside ourselves to focus on," she explained, echoing words she had once said to Richard. "It can be a refuge when we need one most." As the session concluded, one elderly man with advanced lung cancer approached her. "I haven't felt that peaceful in months," he said, his voice raspy but his eyes bright. Like the pain stepped back for a while. This, Melody thought, was why all the late nights completing her certification, all the challenges of building a program from scratch, all the moments of doubt had been worthwhile. Music had always been her refuge. Now she could offer that same comfort to others. That evening, as promised, she took Lily to Richard's home for her movie date with Zoe. The house was not what she had expected from a billionaire. Large and beautiful, certainly, but more warm than ostentatious, with books lining the walls and family photos displayed prominently. "The girls are setting up in the media room," Richard explained, leading her through the house. "Zoe has arranged what appears to be every pillow we own into some sort of fort." Melody laughed. "Lily's been talking about nothing else all day. Thanks for having her over." They paused at the entrance to the media room, watching as the girls arranged snacks and debated the merits of various characters from the movie franchise they were about to watch. Zoe was animated in a way Melody rarely saw outside their piano sessions, gesturing enthusiastically as she made her point. "I never thought I'd see her like this again," Richard said quietly. "After Elena died, it was like all the light went out of her. I tried everything, the best doctors, therapists, schools. Nothing helped." He looked at Melody with naked gratitude in his eyes. "Then you played a piano in a hospital lobby." "I was just doing what I loved," Melody replied simply. "That's exactly why it worked," he said. "Authenticity. You weren't trying to fix her. You were sharing something real." He hesitated. "That's rare in my world." Before she could respond, Lily spotted them and waved excitedly. "Mom, come see our fort. Zoe has the best pillows." As the girls pulled them into their pillow creation, Melody caught Richard's eye and saw her own contentment reflected. There, the shared understanding of two parents, watching their children heal and grow. 1 year to the day after Melody had first noticed Zoe huddled in the corner of the hospital lobby, the music therapy center hosted its first recital. Patients of all ages performed pieces they had learned during their therapy sessions, their achievements measured not by technical perfection, but by personal growth. The final performance featured Zoe and Melody playing the piece Melody had composed. As they reached the concluding measures, Zoe improvised a delicate harmony that complemented the melody perfectly, something she had never done in practice. Afterward, amid the applause, Melody found Richard standing at the back of the room. "She improvised," he said, wonder in his voice. "Elena used to do that. Go off script when the music moved her." Melody nodded. "She's finding her own voice." As the audience dispersed, Melody noticed a young mother with a fretful toddler struggling to gather their belongings. Without thinking, she sat at the piano and began to play a gentle lullaby. The toddler immediately quieted, turning toward the sound with wide, curious eyes. From across the room, Richard watched her, the single mom whose piano playing had changed not just his daughter's life, but the entire culture of the hospital. The woman who had taught him that healing comes in unexpected forms and that sometimes the greatest gifts arrive when we least expect them. And Melody played on, her music creating ripples that would continue long after the final notes faded away.